I'm about 60 years old, and so I've had plenty of time to ruminate on the days of my life. And there are certain days that you remember. Some days you have a pretty good expectation of remembering, such as your wedding day, the days when your kids are born, and the day when I pulled that line in the shop. The engineering was next to me saying, "Oh, that isn't in use anymore. You can pull that." And as soon as I pulled that line, boom, one of our main production lines came to a halt. It got real quiet, except for the people on the line going, "Hey, what the hell?" And the guy next to me going, "Oh man, you shouldn't have pulled that wire." You just told me it was, yeah. That was the day when the company lost many thousands of dollars worth of in-process production and thousands of dollars of underutilized labor. Well, the whole production shift stood around with nothing to do. Of course, I immediately put that line back in, but the equipment didn't restart. And we reset the controllers, and the equipment didn't restart. We were down for the better part of a day. I remember that day. And it was not my fault. That was not my fault. But there are other days that I remember that didn't seem so important at the time, but looking back, they've left an indelible memory. I'd like to relate 3 stories that happened to me during high school decades ago. Things that I still remember, but I didn't think were so important at the time. But as time has moved on, they've become more important to me. Carrie. And Carrie and I were not tight. Carrie was an honor student, an athlete. I think she was a cheerleader. And she hung out with the football players. And Carrie and I didn't have a whole lot to do with each other. We weren't enemies, but we also didn't really spend any time with each other. One day I was in physical education class, which was not my favorite place to be. I was never an athlete. Now, I wasn't handicapped or particularly awkward, but I wasn't an athlete, didn't try to be an athlete, and I wasn't very good at being an athlete, not compared to a lot of the other people. So in physical ed class, I'm out on the track and field doing something very poorly, I'm sure. And Carrie calls me over, which was most unusual. So I'm thinking, what does she want? So I go over and I see her. And she says, "Hey, I see what you're doing over there. And, I think you almost got this. But can I give you a few pointers to help you with your form?" Okay. She says, "Why don't you come hang out with me and the girls here? And you got this. You're going to be great. We can give you a few tips." I think her fellow girlfriends were giving her the stink eye, like, why are you inviting him over here? But she was really nice and helpful and kind. And she reached out and was very generous with her time. And it meant a lot to me, I don't think it turned me into a great athlete, but it would have been easy for her to not do anything or just watch me stumble. But instead she reached out to somebody who she wasn't really tightly associated with, almost a stranger, and lent a hand. And that act of kindness, I remember. I was pretty impressed. I wish I had the chance to go to the high school reunion and see her and say thanks, because I remember that day. Now, from her perspective, it's probably just a little thing, no big deal. And I imagine if I thanked her for being so kind back then, she probably wouldn't remember it. She might not even remember me. But I remember that day. Now, I didn't really associate too tightly with any of the cliques in high school. I wasn't much of a joiner, but I wasn't an outsider. I knew most people. Most people knew me, and I got along with most of the people. But there were some outsiders, people who were rejected by most, and Roy was one of them. I don't think that Roy had any friends. I hope he had a friend, but he really took a lot of abuse in high school. He had a tough time. And I'm not sure what Roy's situation was. I think he might have been autistic. He certainly was socially awkward. And one day between classes, we're all moving through the hallway, and I turn the corner and I see Roy on the ground. And he's got papers and books scattered everywhere, and the kids are all walking on his stuff as they go by and not paying much attention to him. And so I see this, and I stop, and I get down on the ground with Roy and try to help him gather up his stuff and try to shoo some people away so they don't walk all over his papers. And I'm helping him kind of scoop this stuff up, and I say, Roy, you okay? What happened? Roy's like, oh, I dropped my papers. Okay. I said, did you trip or something? He's like, oh, that kid over there, he shoved me against the wall. Glance over, and I knew that kid. He was one of our football players, and he was kind of arrogant. And I said, yeah, Roy, I know him. He's a jerk. He says, it's not you, man. That kid's got problems. You're cool. And I tell you what, I like you a lot more than I like him. And Roy kind of smiled and said, gee, Bear, that's nice. Thanks, man. You're my buddy. You're my good buddy. Well, I didn't want to be known as Roy's good buddy. I didn't want Roy's social standing to tarnish my personal reputation. So I told Roy, I ain't your buddy, but I'm also not your enemy, and went on my way. Didn't think too much about it. In catching up with the high school reunion, I heard that, sadly, Roy has passed away. Now, I was happy to get news that after high school, Roy had gotten married and had children. So I think it turned out all right. But unfortunately, Roy had passed away. And a small eulogy was read on his behalf. And it was obvious that the person who volunteered to speak on Roy's behalf didn't know him at all. I was saddened that I couldn't be there, because I would have liked to have given that eulogy. Even though I didn't know Roy well, I knew him a little bit. I think he deserved better than what he got. And looking back on it, I have a little bit of regret for telling Roy that I'm not your good buddy, but I'm not your enemy. So I'd just like to say that even though I didn't know him well, I consider Roy to be my buddy. I'd like to tell you about Jerry. Jer was a good guy. He really wanted to be accepted by the group. And Jer hung out with the stoners. I didn't hang out with the stoners that often, but they tolerated me occasionally. And it's been forever since I've smoked weed. But back in high school, occasionally I'd hang out with those guys and they'd pass the pipe my way. And pot was a little different than it is today. Back in those days, sometimes you'd have good quality weed going around, and lots of times you wouldn't. And they'd pass the pipe my way, and I'd go, ugh, Mexican dirt weed, dude. And they would say, is what it is, what we got. It's dry, man. It's real dry right now. And the pipe would go over to Jer, and he'd go, oh, this is excellent weed, dude. And I'd be thinking, no, not really. And people would be more than willing to sell him some of that dirtweed for top quality prices. I think he got taken advantage of sometimes. There was one day when I came into the library and some of the stoners were sitting around a big round table, and sat down with them, and we're talking about bands probably. And one of the kids lights up a joint and starts passing it around the table. And I'm thinking, dude, the librarian's going to get freaked out from this, man. He's like, don't worry about it. Just hold it under the table. They'll never know. Well, the library reeks of weed and the stoners are right over there. I think the librarian will probably suss that one out. But on the other hand, the librarian hated the stoners so much that I think that she didn't want to engage with those guys. And she probably just tried to ignore it and hope that we go away soon. So that worked in our favor. Well, they're passing around this joint of terrible dirtweed, and I take it, and I'm like, oh, yeah, that's bad. Pass it on. Jerry is fussing around with it, and while he's doing that, my buddy is reaching behind his head with a lighter and trying to singe the bottom of Jerry's hair while he's busy fussing around with this joint. And Jer's going, man, this is some good stuff. It's like super skunk weed, man. And I'm like, no, that's hair. That's horrible, dude. And I'm like, and I'm thinking, this is bad. I should say something. I should not let this go on. This is not good. But of course, immediately that thought is replaced by, oh, hell no, this is hilarious. Well, a moment later, Jerry's hair catches on fire. I mean, flames on head fire. He must have had some product in his hair that torched up. And so Jerry is sitting here slapping his head, trying to put the flames out, going, not cool, man. This is not cool. True, not cool, but hilarious nonetheless. And I feel like I should have stepped up. I should have said something. I shouldn't have let that go on. But it was pretty funny. And so for years afterwards, we would remind Jerry of the hair fire incident. And he would reply with, yeah, that wasn't cool, man. To our retort was, but it was pretty damn funny. And even Jer would say, well, it was kind of funny. Still wasn't cool. Oh, poor Jer. I feel bad that I didn't defend him when I could have. And I wasn't really tight with Jer, but I thought he was a good guy. And I was absolutely shocked when a decade or two later, at my wedding, Jerry showed up. I don't remember inviting him. Perhaps we did, or he came with somebody else. But it was great seeing him. And I stopped by, had a quick drink with him, caught up for a minute. But I didn't get to spend much time. It was my wedding, and I had a lot of guests and a lot of stuff going on. And so I just kind of touched everybody for a little bit. Didn't really get to hang out for very long. But it was good seeing Jer. It's been a long time. And it wasn't too much after that that I was talking with another one of my friends, and he mentioned, "Oh, hey, Bear, did you hear about Jerry?" I'm like, no, well, what's up? And he goes, Jerry passed away. I had no idea. And it made me feel some regret for not having a better connection, not spending more time with him when I could have, and for not standing up for him when I saw injustice being done. He was a good guy, and he took a fair amount of abuse from some of us. And I didn't do too much to him directly, but I feel like I could have made a difference, but I didn't. So those are some of the days that I remember, some of the things that have left an indelible mark in my history. One of the things I find fascinating are NDE experiences, near-death experiences, where somebody dies, or apparently dies, they flatline, and then a few minutes later, maybe an hour later, they miraculously pop back to life. And when they come back, they tell tales of amazing experiences that they had while they were evidently dead. Experiences where they meet spirit guides and find themselves in a whole nother world. Experiences where they get to review the things that they've done in their life. And it's like they get to view themselves in high definition and can relive the experiences that they've been through. And they get to relive it from their perspective with all of their feelings and emotions and perspective. But they also get to feel the universal empathy so they can perceive that event from the perspective of the other people and how their actions impacted the other people around them. And so it's like there's a high definition recorder recording every single moment of our lives. Everything you do, everything you think, all the actions you take. And the curious thing about this is that these experiences are surprisingly similar with different people. Different people from entirely different walks of life. And of course, the NDE experience seems to be tailored to the individual, but these themes are commonly experienced by all sorts of different people. Now, when your computer is shutting down because of low voltage, all kinds of crazy random stuff can happen and come up. And so I could write this off as saying that when your brain is dying, it's not surprising that you have all sorts of bizarre, weird dreams and experiences that are the result of your systems shutting down. But the fact that these NDE experiences from so many different people have such similarities offers some credence to it. And the people come back from these experiences saying that that wasn't a dream, that was real. That was more real than our lives today. They're convinced. I don't know. I mean, could be just the random thoughts of a dying brain, or it could be real. But if there's some reality behind it, it suggests that our lives are documented, and what we do is recorded. It matters. And we might have the opportunity to face the things that we did in a unfiltered sort of way. And people say that there's no judgment, it's not a trial, it's just a process that helps us decide. But if what we do, we have to account for at some point. Maybe the things that we do in our daily lives that we don't think that much about, maybe they matter more than a lot of us think. And so, if that's the case, I think we could take a bit of good advice from Bill and Ted and Abraham Lincoln. As Lincoln once said, "Be excellent to each other. And party on, dudes."